In this ongoing series based on this collection of the mother's works called The Great Adventure, today we shall take up page 54 of this collection, entitled True Humility. In this passage, the mother has been asked a question: what is the right and the wrong way of being humble? And the mother says, it is very simple. When people are told, be humble, they think immediately of being humble before other men, and that humility is wrong. True humility is humility before the divine, that is, a precise, exact, living sense that one is nothing, one can do nothing, understand nothing without the divine, that even if one is exceptionally intelligent and capable, this is nothing in comparison with the divine consciousness, and this sense one must always keep, because then one always has the true attitude of receptivity, a humble receptivity that does not put personal pretensions in opposition to the divine. Now let's go over this slowly and discuss it. It is very simple. When people are told, be humble, they think immediately of being humble before other men, and that humility is wrong. Which means that being humble is not enough. There is a right and a wrong way of being humble, and that in fact was exactly the question that was put to the mother. And she starts with saying that being humble means being humble in relation to the divine, in front of the divine, not necessarily human beings. Well, let's discuss this a little in greater detail. What is the right way to be humble? And the essence of the right way to be humble is sincerity. That is, one should be humble. One doesn't have to appear to be humble. Being humble is not an actor's job. That is, putting on a show of humility. There can be something like fake humility, and that in fact is not true humility. True humility is sincere humility. One can't fool even ordinary people with that sort of fake humility for very long. They see through it, and certainly one cannot fool God through that type of humility that has been put on for the sake of appearances. And therefore humility has to have any meaning in relation to being humble in front of the divine. It has to be a perfectly sincere humility. Now, here there is a related question that comes up, and that is, do we have a right to have some self-respect? Now, self-respect, strictly speaking, means respecting the self. Now, self itself is a word that can become confusing, especially when spoken. Because in writing, at least, one can sometimes write the self with a small s and sometimes with a capital S. And the meanings are vastly different. When we write some self with the small s, what it means is me as an individual, the way I normally identify myself with my body and mind, as an individual with a certain name and certain relationships and so on. That is what this self with the small s means. Whereas when we say the same thing with a capital S, it means my true identity, what I truly am. That is the true identity of the self, and that in fact is the divine. No, when we say that this world is Maya, we heard one of the bhajans which was talking of this. It doesn't mean that me as an individual is an illusion. What it means is that my identification with myself in terms of my form and name and relationships, that is an illusion. While, say, if you have converted clay into pots, certainly the deeper identity of all the pots is clay. The pots will break one day and we'll get clay. That is their lasting reality. And then the clay can be recycled to give another set of new pots. But while the parts exist, the parts are also real, the parts are not unreal. And therefore, we as individuals are also real while we last. What is important is to understand that the way we appear and the way we normally identify ourselves is not our true and lasting reality. So, respecting the self within us means respecting what we truly are. That is respecting the divine in us. And that is certainly okay. So that is true self-respect. True self-respect is respecting the self with the capital S in us. Now, when it is respecting the self within us, certainly it goes without saying that we have to respect the same self also in others, because they also are manifestations of the same divine. Their true identity is also the same. And therefore, respecting others becomes an automatic extension of respecting the self in ourselves. So far as the true identity or the self with the capital S is concerned, it is exactly the same in us as individuals as well as in all others. And therefore, true humility or true self-respect is respecting the self in ourselves as well as others. Now, this is in contrast with what one may call self-admiration. Now, self-admiration is a Rajasic virtue, it's a Rajasic instinct, and is an expression of the Rajasic ego. That is, trying to find all the good qualities one has, and on that basis, building up a sense of superiority. That is self-admiration. So, this self-admiration is an expression of the Rajasic ego. In contrast with this is something which is considered much more dignified, and that is pride. Now, pride is again an expression of the ego, but of the Sattvic ego. Sometimes it can acquire a still more dignified form when we say that, well, I am not proud of myself, but I am proud of my country, I am proud of my language, I am proud of my religion, I am proud of my guru, and so on and so forth, which means a collective form of pride. That is also an expression of the Sattvic ego. And therefore, there can be really, in fact, no limit to this, and sometimes we can cheat ourselves into believing that all these are quite compatible with humility, but in fact, true humility involves getting rid of each of these expressions of the ego, whether it is Rajasic or Sattvic, and respecting just the divine in ourselves, in others, and in individuals and in other collectivities. So, whether it is individuals or whether it is collectivities, respecting the divine in all is what true humility is. How about the flaws and defects that we have? Now, true humility requires that we be conscious of them. We should be aware of those also, which means we should be able to see ourselves the way we see others. We are easily able to see the defects in others. We should be at least as objective when we are looking at ourselves and be able to see our own defects. But then that does not mean that we go into a state of constant self-depreciation. True humility means that we be conscious of our defects, work on them, try to remove them, and then trust the divine to add its grace in helping us remove them. Because we cannot remove all our defects through our own efforts, and therefore we do need divine grace. So once again, turning to the divine, we turn to the divine for removing our defects. So just as we turn to the divine and thank him for all the good qualities that we have, we turn to him again to remove our defects, and that is what true humility is. So one would realize that true humility is more an inner attitude. It is more within than outside. It is something that is inside us, may not show that much outside. It is this inner attitude which constitutes true humility. Now let us see what true humility is not. In contrast with true humility, which is basically an inner attitude, fake humility is more outward than within, and in fact it is born of pride and breeds pride. It's born of pride because it is in fact an expression of the pride, but the pride which is being covered with a sense of humility, and breeds in fact further pride because one feels that in spite of being so good, I am so humble. So that in a way is not only born of pride, also breeds pride and vanity, and that is not true humility. In the same way, constant self-depreciation is also not true humility. Just as self-admiration is an expression of the Rajasic ego and pride is an expression of the Sattvic ego, constant self-depreciation is an expression of the Tamasic ego. The person is lazy and then wants to blame all his deficiencies for it, finds an excuse in all his deficiencies and feels that I have done enough by accepting all my deficiencies and therefore I need not do anything. So, it becomes an expression of the Tamasic ego. So, one doesn't have to go into that chain of constant self-depreciation and worrying what will happen to me, mera kya hoga, main to kuch bhi nahi hu. To go into that sort of a constant worry does not help. That in fact is an expression of the Tamasic ego. What type of humility is not desirable? We saw that the humility that is not desirable is the humility that is in relation to human beings, particularly when it comes to tolerating evil and injustice. Doesn't mean that we don't have to be humble with others, because we see the divine in them, we have to be humble with others also. So, but that is one thing, but tolerating evil and injustice out of fear is not true humility. Now, the root of true humility, therefore, is basically being able to see the divine as the source of everything, as the source of all the good qualities that we have, all the talents that we have, all the gifts that we have, and all the circumstances that we get to give an expression to those qualities. All that comes from the divine, and that is the root of true humility. Now let's go a little further in the passage. True humility is humility before the divine, that is, a precise, exact, living sense that one is nothing, one can do nothing, understand nothing without the divine, and even if one is exceptionally intelligent and capable, this is nothing in comparison with the divine consciousness, and this sense one must always keep. So one has to realize that whatever has come to me has come from the divine, and what has come is only a small fraction of the divine consciousness. So no matter how intelligent or capable I think I am, it still is nothing compared to the supreme consciousness, the potential that we all have. We are all potentially divine, but then what is expressed is only a very small fraction of that potential, only a very small fraction of that divine consciousness. So both this realization that what I have may be considerable, but that has come from the divine, and what still remains to be done, what still remains to be expressed is much more, and that also will come from the divine. Both these realizations are a part of true humility and would inspire true humility. And this sense one must always keep, because then one always has the true attitude of receptivity, a humble receptivity that does not put personal pretensions in opposition to the divine. So this makes us receptive to receiving the influences from the divine. Because essentially in yoga what it means is that what yoga is about is acting as an antenna. The divine is all around us. We have the potential to receive from the divine, but then like a receiver, we have to keep our antennae up. We have to keep our antennae active. And if we do that, then we will be able to receive more and more. And that receptivity comes only if we are able to put ourselves in this attitude of true humility, realizing that what we are is because of the divine, and what we can be and will be will also be because of the same. So the source of everything is the same. So being able to connect with that source, remaining open to that source, is what yoga is about, and that in fact breeds automatically true humility. So that will, the humble receptivity that does not put personal pretensions in opposition to the divine, which means that trying to sort of see ourselves and the divine as separate, and being able to sometimes use our mental abilities to put them in conflict with the divine. Because when we are too proud of our own abilities as individuals at a mental level, then there is sometimes a tendency to see what all is wrong with the world, as if God has made some mistakes. So that puts us in opposition to the divine, that puts personal pretensions in opposition to the divine. That will not happen if one has been able to cultivate true humility. Now I have with me a brief sort of a plan, a 12-point plan, as you might call it, for cultivating true humility. And much of it is based on a book called The Laws of the Spirit World by Khurshid Bhavnagari. And I found it very useful, and therefore I thought I'll share it with you, how one may be able to cultivate true humility. The first and most important thing is to keep the psychic being open. That is, to keep our divine essence open to influences from the divine, which means keeping our antennae up, keeping our antennae active. That in fact is the most important thing. The other things are all aids to that. And what are those other things? The second important thing is prayer. Because one of the important components of every prayer is gratitude, acknowledging our defects, and both these put us in touch with the divine. Prayer is essentially communication with the divine, and it can have several components: adoration of the divine, asking something of the divine, but then it also includes often thanking the divine for all that we have, thanking the divine for all being the source of everything that we have, material, mental, physical, whatever resources that we have, thanking the divine for that, and also confessing our shortcomings, flaws, deficiencies, defects, and requesting for them to be removed. Now, all these are a part of a prayer. So this type of communication with God on a regular basis is again a very important sort of way of cultivating true humility. The third is to try and understand God. That is, trying to understand God, how fair He has been. How fair He has been in terms of distributing talents, weaknesses, circumstances, and so on. And that again is a part of prayer. And that takes us from ourselves, that is, looking at our own achievements and abilities and accomplishments, from that to looking at also others. Which means that we try to understand God and try to understand the creation of God, which all the rest of the creation also is. So trying to understand the creation of God as a whole. And we find that God has been very fair in distributing talents, abilities, and circumstances, with the result that, as they say, that none of us has all the good things in life and none of us has everything bad. Life levels everybody, just a matter of time. So in that sense, He has been very fair. And why He has had this uneven distribution? This uneven distribution because we need all types to make the world. And secondly, within the life of an individual, if everything were to go well, we would not progress much spiritually, and if everything were to go wrong, again probably we would lose faith in God, and again we would not develop much. So therefore we have this type of an uneven and sort of heterogeneous sort of a distribution. But then the fact remains that over a lifetime, life seems to level everybody. So we try to understand God and understand the creation of God and remain in touch with the creation of God. And how can we do that? Because we can understand the creation only if we remain in touch with them in a sense of true humility. And what does that involve? That involves being generous with our love and compassion towards others. So being generous with our love and compassion automatically puts us in touch with the rest of the creation and puts us in the humility mode. Because one cannot love and have compassion without a sense of humility. We should try to understand the point of view of others in any discussion. Understand the point of view of others, because we are all imperfect manifestations of the divine. We are all manifestations of the divine, but highly imperfect manifestations. So just as I can see some problems with the other person's point of view, there could also be some problems with my point of view. My point of view is not the only way of looking at things, and therefore we should try and see the other person's point of view sympathetically, favorably, charitably, and with the same sort of compassion which we have towards our own point of view. That is again a mark of true humility, and that is something which is true of all these virtues. When we practice them, we enhance them. So true humility will make us look at the other person's point of view favorably, and as we look at the other person's point of view more and more favorably, we'll find that we'll become more and more humble. There's a story about President Abraham Lincoln. He once ordered the transfer of some regiments in the army. You know, the president everywhere is the supreme commander of the armed forces, so he can order anything. So he ordered the transfer of some regiments. And when the Secretary of War, that is the person, like the general, the chief of army staff, when he came to know, it happened to be some General Stanton, when he came to know, he said, Lincoln is a fool. No, what he has done is not the right thing. Lincoln is a fool. And through the grapevine, it reached Abraham Lincoln that this person said Lincoln is a fool. What was Lincoln's reaction? Lincoln's reaction was, if Stanton has said so, I must be one. He is generally right. Now, this is true humility. He said, if Stanton says so, I must be one, means I must be a fool. He is generally right, let me talk to him. He walked over to him, discussed the whole thing with him, and this general could convince him that what he had ordered was not right, and he took back his order. Now that is true humility. So understanding the point of view of others. The other aspect of the same thing is not being very hasty in judging others. Because very often we are rather too quick in judging others. One brief contact and we feel that we know the person and we have formed our impression of him for life. Now that is again not true humility. Because if we look at ourselves, we ourselves are not the same all the time. We have our good moments and bad moments, highs and lows, and the same thing happens to others also, and therefore one should not be too hasty in judging others. Which in other words means that we talk to God, understand God, talk to the creation of God, and understand the creation of God. That is what brings true humility. The other 2 points, in fact, we have already discussed to quite some extent. Being aware of one's strength and also being aware of one's flaws. But then being aware of our strengths as something that has come from the divine, and being aware of our flaws as something that can be removed and taken care of by the divine. Now, sometimes, we are not able to see our flaws properly. We want to do something, and we feel that I can do anything. And we don't realize that everybody can't do everything and everybody doesn't have to do everything. There's a little story about a person who had an intense desire to be part of an orchestra. So he went to the manager of the orchestra and told him, I want to join the orchestra. So this person told him that, but you don't play any musical instrument, you don't know how to play any musical instrument. He said, that is true, I don't know how to play any musical instrument, but I find in your orchestra there is one person who just keeps waving a stick. That is something I can also do. You see, that is the way we sometimes look at ourselves. So one should understand one's flaws and accept that everybody doesn't have to do everything. Then the next point in cultivating true humility is handling success as well as failure properly. Handling success well means handling it with gratitude. And handling failure properly means not blaming anybody for our failures. So both these things are important, and they also help us in cultivating genuine humility. The next point is one should not hesitate to seek help or advice from others. Because the divine also needs instruments. Of course, ultimately everything comes from the divine. But the divine needs instruments, and if we find an instrument available to us who can help us, who can advise us, there's no harm in acknowledging that yes, somebody can be better than we are, somebody can know something more, and seeking that help or advice. So one should not have any hesitation about that. Another thing which helps in cultivating true humility is cultivating a sense of humor, especially the type of humor that can laugh at oneself. We should be able to laugh at ourselves, and that is again a source of great humility. Once a young writer was approached by Mark Twain, and this young writer said, I'm very fond of writing, I'm very interested in writing, but I don't have the confidence. I feel sometimes that I can't write well, and that prevents me from writing. And he asked Mark Twain, has it also happened to you? Now Mark Twain didn't say, I'm a great writer, it has never happened to me. He didn't say that. What he said was, yes, it happened to me once, after I had been writing for 15 years. So then he asked him, then did you stop writing? He said, no, but by then I was already famous. Now this is sense of humor. So one should be able to laugh at oneself, and that is also something that helps in cultivating humility. And last but not least, surrender to the divine. That is surrender of the personal will to the divine and offering everything that we do to the divine. You know, that is the difference between an offering and something that we do under the impression that we have done it, we have the abilities, and therefore we have done it. These days in management, the usual talk is about performance. The performance has to be good, the performance has to be improved, and so on. Now, what it means is that the individuals have some abilities, and then if they try hard, they work hard, they'll be able to improve the performance. And in order to show the performance good and show it even better than it is, then the whole exercise becomes to try and impress others. The presentation should be better than the substance. So that is performance. But when one has realized that whatever comes to me has come from the divine, and therefore it has to be offered to the divine, that is not a performance, that is an offering. Now in both cases the person puts in his best. The person puts his heart and soul into the work with both attitudes. Because if the person is trying to do it to improve the performance, again he'll try to do his best. If he is trying to make of it an offering, again he'll try to do his best, because the work should be fit enough to become an offering. To make it fit enough to be an offering, again he'll try to do his best. But there is a difference between the two. In one case, he will be able to cultivate true humility. In the other case, the better the performance, the greater will be the sense of pride. The greater will be the sense of self-admiration. So it will boost Rajasic and Sattvic pride, Sattvic egos, and the other practical implication of the two attitudes is that no matter how capable the person is and how much work he has put in, how hard he has tried, the outcome still is not entirely in our own hands. The outcome could still be very different, quite opposite of what we had intended. And therefore, if the person has done this with the idea that I am capable of doing this and therefore I am working hard and therefore the outcome will be this and so on, and the outcome turns out to be different, he goes into a depression. He cannot tolerate it. On the other hand, if he has done it as something that has come to him from the divine and as an offering to the divine, if the attitude turns out to be different, he can take it with great equanimity and delight that, well, the outcome is still in the hands of the one who is running the world, and in my eyes it may look like failure, but in his eyes there's only one outcome, and that is success. So from his point of view, it is still successful. It is my limited way of looking at it that it looks like a failure. There's a little story about a person who tried to kill the Pope, John Paul II, and he failed. In the sense that the Pope did not die, he missed the mark. Now, the Pope was asked for his comments, and what the Pope said was, well, one hand pulled the trigger and the other hand guided the bullet. Now, the hand that pulled the trigger was that of the one who wanted to kill him, and that day he must have felt that today I missed my mark. He must be very confident. That's why he took up this job. He took up this mission. He must be very confident that I'm a very good marksman and I'll succeed. But from his point of view, that day he failed. But then there was an unseen hand that guided the bullet. From the point of view of that to whom that unseen hand belonged, there's only one thing, and that is success. It was successful because if the Pope didn't have to die that day, how could he die? And therefore, from that point of view, from his point of view, there's only one thing, and that is success. So surrender to the divine is the most important thing, the last point in this 12-point plan of how we can cultivate true humility. I'll end this discussion with a small piece from another of the mother's books, Conversations, 1929 to 1931. And here she says, paradoxical though it may sound, the divine who is absolutely perfect is at the same time absolutely humble. So, who are we? We have to discuss so much about how we can be humble and why we should be humble and so on and so forth. The divine itself is extremely humble. That's a very revealing point. Paradoxical though it may sound, the divine who is absolutely perfect is at the same time absolutely humble. Humble as nothing else can ever be. He is not occupied in admiring himself. God never admires himself. It's his devotees who admire him. He doesn't say anything about himself. Not only that, he does not mind even being criticized. There are people who criticize God, he doesn't mind it. He continues loving them. There are people who say God doesn't exist. He doesn't mind it. He doesn't care. He goes on loving them. So, in that sense, he is not occupied in admiring himself. Though he is the all, he ever seeks to find himself in what is not himself. That is why he has created in his own being what seems to be a colossal not himself. This is what Maya is all about. Sometimes, we feel Maya is something, which is useless because it is only an illusion, it is passing, it is temporary, and so on and so forth. But Maya is a great capacity of the divine. Just imagine the all-knowing, all-powerful divine being able to express itself in dead matter, which seems to be unconscious. It's a tremendous amount of self-limitation. It's trying to appear much, much less than you are. It's not just appearing different from what you are, but it is appearing very much at a lower level than you are. Now that is extreme humility. So Maya is an expression of God's humility, to be able to pack himself into forms which come nowhere close to him. That is Maya. So Maya is a great capacity of the divine. Though he is the all, he ever seeks to find himself in what he is not himself. That is why he has created in his own being what seems to be a colossal not himself. So what he has created in this Maya is a lot of that which is not himself. He is within it, but he is not of it. He is so different from it. And yet, he is all the time trying to plant seeds in what seems to be not himself for searching itself. He has planted that urge in this creation to move towards that self-expression, towards that expression of their true identity, so that the divine can be expressed better. He is not occupied in admiring himself. Though he is the all, he ever seeks to find himself in what is not himself, what is so undivine looking, what is not himself looking at all. That is where he seeks to find himself. That is why he has created in his own being what seems to be a colossal not himself. This phenomenal world. So this whole phenomenal world. Why is phenomenal world? What is a phenomenon? A phenomenon is an event which has a beginning and an end. The phenomenon starts, the phenomenon comes to an end. An event begins, an event comes to an end. The world also begins, the world comes to an end. Everything within the world comes and goes. So that is why it is a world full of phenomena. It's full of events. So this phenomenal world, it seems to be a colossal not himself, this phenomenal world. He has passed into a form in which he has to discover endlessly in time the infinite contents of that which he possesses entirely in the eternal consciousness. His consciousness is eternal, forever, unlimited by time. And yet he has limited himself to time and seeks to find himself in this world limited by time. Time is a concept of Maya again. Space is a concept of Maya. His dimensions are infinite everywhere. The universe still is finite. The space is finite, and within that, he is trying to find himself by hiding in such a way that he is there and yet we are not able to see him. So that is the type of magic he has created. So that's why Sri Aurobindo has called him in the Savitri very often the great magician. The great magician, because he has hidden himself so effectively that he is there everywhere and yet we don't see him. So that is God's humility. He has passed into a form in which he has to discover endlessly in time the infinite contents of that which he possesses entirely in the eternal consciousness. So he is eternal and timeless, and yet he has limited himself to time. One of the greatest victories of this ineffable humility of God will be the transformation of matter, which is apparently the most undivine. Now, what will this great humility of God lead to? One of the greatest victories of this ineffable humility of God, ineffable, unspeakable, it is beyond words. Humility which cannot be described in words. So, one of the greatest victories of this tremendous humility of God will be the transformation of matter, which is apparently the most undivine. Matter looks completely dead, unconscious, can't do anything, can't know anything, but it contains within it the consciousness of the divine. It is the divine that has limited itself to this inconscient form of matter, and it is because of the great humility of the divine that one day even this matter will express the divine consciousness. That is a futuristic idea. That is what characterizes the thought of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, that even matter will show the same type of plasticity, the same type of consciousness which is a characteristic of the divine consciousness. Matter looks unplastic, very rigid, but it will not always remain so rigid. It will display the same plasticity, the same flexibility, And the same type of capacity to know and respond, which we associate with the divine, that will be the type of transformation that Sri Aurobindo and the Mother have visualized in the supramental consciousness. So that will be one of the greatest victories of this humility of the divine, who has chosen to pack himself and hide himself in forms which look completely different from what the divine actually is. So the divine, in spite of being all and in spite of being everything, is in fact the most humble, completely humble, absolutely humble, humble as nothing else can ever be. He never admires himself, and he hides himself, remains always in the background, never trying to make his presence very conspicuous. He's conspicuous by his absence, as you might say, all the time, everywhere, and that is the humility of the divine.